The September sun hung high over Denver's Riverside Community Fair, casting golden light across the crowd of families enjoying the perfect Saturday afternoon. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her sunglasses and smiled as she watched her daughter Emma bounce excitedly near the bouncy castle, her pigtails flying with each enthusiastic jump. At 3 years old, Emma was normally shy around strangers, preferring to cling to her mother's leg rather than venture into crowds. But today was different. Today, something had awakened in the little girl, a spark of pure joy that made Sarah's heart swell with happiness. "Mommy, look, I'm jumping so high," Emma squealed, her tiny pink sneakers lifting off the inflatable surface. Sarah fumbled with her phone, desperate to capture this moment of pure childhood bliss. The past year had been difficult. Sarah's husband had passed away suddenly, leaving her to raise Emma alone. These moments of genuine happiness felt like precious gems she needed to preserve, to remind herself that despite everything, they were going to be okay. Sarah finally got her phone's camera working and began recording. "Show me your biggest jump, sweetie," she called out. Emma grinned, preparing to launch herself into the air. But then, without warning, everything changed. Emma's smile vanished. Her body went completely still, frozen mid-bounce as if someone had pressed pause on her entire being. Her head turned slowly toward the far end of the fairground, her eyes growing impossibly wide. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm afternoon. She'd never seen her daughter look like this, so focused, so intense, so utterly transfixed. "Emma," Sarah called out, concern creeping into her voice. "Baby, what's wrong?" Emma didn't respond. Instead, she climbed down from the bouncy castle with deliberate, almost mechanical movements. The moment her feet hit the grass, she began walking, no, not walking, moving with purpose toward something Sarah couldn't yet see. The transformation was startling. This was the same child who refused to walk through the grocery store without holding her mother's hand, yet here she was, navigating through a crowded fair like she was following an invisible thread only she could perceive. "Emma, wait," Sarah called, abandoning her spot by the bouncy castle and hurrying after her daughter. Her heart pounded as she pushed through clusters of families, keeping her eyes locked on those bouncing pigtails. Where was she going? What had captured her attention so completely? They weaved past the cotton candy stand, the face-painting booth, and the balloon artist. Emma never slowed down, never looked back. Sarah's maternal instinct screamed that something was wrong, but Emma didn't seem distressed. She seemed drawn, pulled by some invisible force toward a destination she somehow knew. Then Sarah saw it. The Denver Police Department's K-9 demonstration booth, set up near the center of the fair. A small crowd had gathered around a display table covered with police equipment, informational pamphlets, and photos of the department's various K-9 officers. Standing beside the booth was Officer James, a stocky man in his mid-30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor. And sitting perfectly at attention beside him was Max, a magnificent German shepherd with intelligent eyes and a glossy black and tan coat that gleamed in the sunlight. Officer was mid-sentence, explaining to a group of curious children how police dogs were trained, when something caught his attention. His experienced eyes tracked to the small figure approaching from the crowd, a little girl with determined steps and an expression that seemed far too knowing for her age. Max noticed her in the same instant. The change in the dog was immediate and profound. His ears, which had been relaxed and slightly back, suddenly shot forward to full attention. His entire body tensed, muscles rippling beneath his coat as he rose from his sitting position. The calm, professional demeanor he'd maintained throughout the entire demonstration shattered in a heartbeat. A sound emerged from deep within Max's chest, not a growl, not a bark, but something else entirely. It was a whimper, high-pitched and desperate, filled with an emotion that made several people in the crowd turn to stare. Officer looked down at his partner in shock. In 5 years of working together, through countless dangerous situations, chaotic crime scenes, and intense training scenarios, he had never heard Max make that sound. Emma stopped exactly 3 feet from the demonstration table. Sarah finally caught up to her daughter, breathless and confused, her hand reaching out to grab Emma's shoulder. But something in the air, some electric tension crackling between the child and the dog, made her freeze. The crowd fell silent. Even the children stopped their chatter, sensing that something extraordinary was happening. Time seemed to slow, the noise of the fair fading into a distant hum. In that suspended moment, Emma raised her small hand, her finger pointing directly at Max with unwavering certainty. Two words fell from her lips, clear and confident, spoken with a conviction that seemed impossible from someone so young. "My angel." The world tilted. Officer felt his blood run cold, his grip on Max's leash tightening instinctively. Sarah's mouth fell open, confusion and fear washing over her face. The crowd exchanged glances, uncertain whether to be charmed or concerned. But Max reacted like a dog possessed. His powerful body lunged forward with such explosive force that a trained officer who'd handled this dog through countless situations nearly lost his footing. The leash went taut, straining against the dog's desperate attempt to reach the little girl. Max's paws scraped against the grass, his entire body straining, pulling, fighting against the restraint with a desperation that bordered on mania. And then the crowd saw something that would haunt them for days afterward. Tears. Actual tears streaming from the German shepherd's eyes, rolling down his dark muzzle as he cried, not like a dog, but like something caught between animal and human, expressing an emotion too complex, too profound for simple canine behavior. Stood frozen, his mind reeling, unable to process what his eyes were showing him. His partner, his reliable, disciplined, unshakable partner, was falling apart before his eyes. And this little girl, this tiny child who'd appeared from nowhere, stood watching it all with the calm acceptance of someone greeting an old friend. "What the hell?" whispered, his voice lost in the commotion as Max continued to pull, to cry, to beg with every fiber of his being to reach the child who'd called him her angel. Sarah's protective instincts finally kicked in. She stepped forward, ready to pull Emma away from the clearly distressed dog. But Emma moved first. With the fearlessness only children possess, she walked calmly toward the crying German shepherd, closing the distance that leash had maintained. "Emma, no!" Sarah cried out. But it was too late, and what happened next would change all their lives forever. Officer James had served with the Denver Police Department's K-9 unit for over a decade. He'd worked with 3 different dogs during his career, each one exceptional in their own right. But Max was something special. The German shepherd had been with him for 5 years, and in that time they'd become more than partners. They were brothers in arms, connected by an unspoken bond forged through countless hours of training and real-world operations. Had seen Max remain calm during riots, maintain composure while bullets flew overhead during an armed standoff, and keep his focus while searching for missing children in chaotic, emotionally charged situations. Max was the definition of a professional police dog, disciplined, controlled, and utterly reliable. The dog had earned 3 commendations for bravery and was regularly requested for the most difficult assignments. That's why what happened next everything thought he knew about his partner. As Emma took another step forward, Max's restraint shattered completely. The dog lunged with such explosive power that actually stumbled backward, his boots sliding across the grass. The leather leash burned against his palm as Max pulled with a strength the officer hadn't felt since the dog's early training days, before discipline and control had been ingrained into every fiber of his being. "Max, heel," commanded, using the firm, authoritative voice that had never failed to bring his partner back to attention. Nothing. Max didn't even acknowledge the command. The dog's entire focus was locked on Emma with an intensity that bordered on obsession. The crowd gasped and instinctively stepped back, parents pulling their children closer. A woman screamed. Someone shouted for security. The peaceful community demonstration had transformed into a scene of chaos and fear in seconds. felt panic rising in his chest, not for himself but for Max. If his partner hurt someone, especially a child, that would be the end. They'd put him down without hesitation. "Max, stand down, now," barked again, pulling back on the leash with both hands. But Max was beyond commands, beyond training, beyond everything that had defined him as a police dog. He was operating on pure instinct, driven by something primal that superseded years of conditioning. Then saw something that made his blood freeze: tears. Real tears streaming down Max's face, cutting lines through his dark fur, dripping onto the grass below. In 10 years of working with canines, had never seen a dog cry actual tears. Dogs whimpered, they whined, they showed distress in dozens of ways. But this was something else entirely. This was grief. This was recognition. This was a pain so deep it transcended species. Max's whimpering had evolved into something that barely sounded canine, a keening wail that seemed to come from his very soul. His powerful body shook violently, muscles trembling beneath his coat. Foam formed at the corners of his mouth, not from aggression but from the sheer emotional intensity of the moment. His paws scraped desperately at the ground, leaving deep gouges in the grass. Sarah Mitchell's maternal instinct screamed at her to grab Emma and run. Every rational part of her brain told her that this dog was dangerous, out of control, a threat to her daughter. She lunged forward, her hands reaching for Emma's shoulders, ready to yank her baby to safety. But Emma, impossibly, inexplicably, remained completely calm. The 3-year-old turned her head slightly, looking up at her mother with those wide, knowing eyes. "It's okay, Mommy," she said softly, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed impossible from someone so young. "He's sad. He thought he lost me." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Lost her. What did that mean? They'd never had a dog. They'd never even been to this fair before. Emma had no connection to this animal, no history that could explain this reaction. Yet here was her daughter, speaking with absolute certainty about emotions and relationships that couldn't possibly exist. "Emma, baby, please step back," Sarah pleaded, her voice cracking with fear and confusion. Emma shook her head gently. "He needs me, Mommy." Before Sarah could stop her, Emma took 3 deliberate steps forward, closing the distance between herself and the desperate dog. The crowd's murmur rose to a fever pitch. Someone yelled for to control his animal. Another voice called 911. The world seemed to be spinning out of control. Made a split-second decision. Every fiber of his training told him to pull Max back, to maintain control, to protect the public. But something in the little girl's confidence, something in Max's tears made him hesitate. Against every protocol he'd ever learned, he loosened his grip on the leash, just slightly. That was all Max needed. The German Shepherd surged forward, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah was certain she was about to watch her daughter be attacked. She screamed Emma's name, her body moving forward even though she knew she'd never reach her in time. But Max didn't attack. Instead, when he reached Emma, the powerful police dog trained to take down armed suspects, to track criminals through miles of wilderness, to be a weapon and shield for his handler, collapsed. His legs simply gave out, and he crumpled at Emma's feet like a puppet with cut strings. Then, in a display that left the entire crowd speechless, Max rolled onto his back in complete submission. His belly was exposed, his paws in the air, his head tilted back. It was the most vulnerable position a dog could assume, a gesture of total trust and surrender that Max had never shown to anyone, not even. Emma dropped to her knees beside the sobbing dog. Her small hand reached out, trembling slightly, and placed it gently on Max's chest, right over his frantically beating heart. The moment her palm made contact, Max's entire body shuddered. His whimpering changed pitch, becoming softer, almost like a lullaby. "You found me," Emma whispered, leaning down so her face was inches from Max's. "You found me, and now everything's okay." Max's brown eyes locked onto Emma's blue ones. His massive paw lifted slowly, carefully, and touched her arm with a gentleness that seemed impossible from something so powerful. Fresh tears rolled down his muzzle, but the desperate keening had stopped. In its place was a soft, rhythmic whine, the sound of someone who'd been searching for something precious and finally, impossibly, held it in their grasp again. Sarah stood frozen, her hands covering her mouth, tears streaming down her own face. She didn't understand what was happening, but she understood emotion. She understood love. And what she was witnessing between her daughter and this dog was a bond so profound, so obviously real, that denying it would be like denying gravity. Slowly lowered himself to one knee, his hand still holding the leash but no longer pulling. His eyes were wet. Around them, the crowd had fallen completely silent. Phones were raised, recording every second of this impossible moment. No one spoke. No one moved. They simply watched as a 3-year-old girl and a police dog held each other like long-lost family members finally reunited. Emma lay down beside Max, her small body curling against his larger frame. The dog immediately adjusted his position, wrapping his body protectively around her in a gesture that looked practiced, familiar, like something he'd done 1,000 times before. His head rested on her shoulder, and he released a long, shuddering sigh that seemed to expel years of pain and searching. "Who are you?" whispered, looking at Emma with wonder and confusion. "Who are you to my dog?" Emma looked up at the officer, her hand stroking Max's fur with the confidence of someone who'd been doing it her entire life. When she spoke, her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made hands shake. "I'm the one he's been looking for." And in that moment, Officer James knew with absolute certainty that his life, and his understanding of what was possible in this world, had just changed forever. The silence that blanketed the fairground was broken only by the sound of Max's rhythmic breathing and Emma's soft humming, a melody Sarah had never heard her daughter sing before. The crowd stood transfixed, phones capturing every second of the inexplicable scene unfolding before them. Some people were crying. Others stood with hands pressed to their hearts, bearing witness to something they instinctively knew was extraordinary, even if they couldn't explain it. Officer remained on one knee, his radio crackling with dispatch asking for a status update. He ignored it. His entire world had narrowed to the sight of his unshakable partner lying in complete submission beside a child he'd supposedly never met. Hands trembled as he watched Max's tail wagging slowly against the grass, the dog's eyes never leaving Emma's face, as if afraid she might disappear if he looked away even for a second. "This isn't possible," whispered to himself, his voice hoarse with emotion. "This just isn't possible." Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out shaky and uncertain. "Officer, I don't understand what's happening. We've never met your dog before. We don't even have pets." "Emma's never," she trailed off, watching her daughter stroke Max's fur with a familiarity that contradicted every word she was saying. Looked up at Sarah, his professional composure crumbling. "Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Max isn't just any dog. He's been trained since he was 8 weeks old. He's been through thousands of hours of conditioning, discipline, protocol. He's worked active crime scenes, faced down armed criminals, searched through disaster zones. I've seen him maintain perfect composure while a building was literally exploding around us." His voice cracked. "But I have never, not once in 5 years, seen him react to anyone like this. Not to me, not to my wife, not to anyone." "My friend," Emma murmured, her small fingers tracing patterns in Max's fur. "My good friend." The words sent chills down Sarah's spine. She'd heard Emma use that exact phrase before, but never in reference to a real person or animal. For months after they'd adopted her, Emma had talked about her friend during her sleep. Sarah and her late husband David had assumed it was an imaginary companion, a coping mechanism for a baby who'd been through trauma they couldn't fully understand. The sleep talking had eventually faded, and Sarah had forgotten about it entirely. Until now. A middle-aged woman from the crowd stepped forward tentatively. She wore scrubs with a veterinary clinic logo on the pocket. "Officer, I'm doctor, I'm a vet. "May I approach?" Nodded, grateful for any professional opinion that might make sense of this situation. Doctor knelt beside Emma and Max, her experienced eyes scanning the dog's body language. She observed silently for a full minute before speaking. "This is remarkable," she said softly. "What we're seeing here isn't normal bonding behavior. This is recognition, deep, established recognition." She looked at Sarah. "Your daughter said my friend, not a friend. That specificity matters. And look at the dog's behavior. He's not just being friendly or submissive. He's exhibiting protection behaviors, the kind we typically see in dogs who bonded with an infant." "But that's impossible," Sarah protested. "Emma's only 3 years old and we've never had a dog." "How long have you had Emma?" Doctor asked gently. Sarah felt her throat tighten. We adopted her when she was 3 weeks old, almost 3 years ago." The words hung in the air like smoke, and Doctor exchanged a meaningful glance that made Sarah's heart race. There was something they weren't saying, some connection forming in their minds that she couldn't quite grasp. By now, the crowd had swelled to over 100 people. The fair's security team had arrived, but they stood at a distance, as captivated by the scene as everyone else. Several people were, and to those present, the videos were already going viral. Within the hour, Police Dog's reunion and Emma and Max would be trending worldwide. Emma suddenly sat up and Max immediately adjusted his position, his body pressed against her side like a warm, protective shield. She looked directly at her mother with those unsettlingly wise eyes. "Mommy, he was cold too. That night when it was cold, he was with me. He kept me warm." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. She'd never told Emma about the circumstances of her adoption. Emma had been too young to understand, and Sarah had planned to wait until she was older to explain that she'd been found abandoned. They'd never discussed it, never even hinted at it in Emma's presence. "So how did Emma know about a cold night?" "What night, sweetie?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" "The night with the stars," Emma said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It was so cold and I was crying, but then my friend came. He was warm. He laid down next to me and made the cold go away." The pieces were clicking together in his mind with horrifying clarity. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and opened his photo gallery. He scrolled back, through years of pictures of Max at training exercises, at community events, receiving awards. Finally, he found what he was looking for. "When did you adopt Max?" Doctor asked quietly. 4 years ago, replied, his voice distant. "I got him from the Denver Animal Shelter when he was estimated to be about 2 years old. They found him as a stray." He paused, his finger hovering over his phone screen. "In Colorado Springs." Sarah's vision swam. Colorado Springs. That was where Emma had been found, where someone had left her outside a fire station on a December night when temperatures had dropped below freezing. "May I see your adoption papers?" asked Sarah. "For Emma, I mean, please." Sarah's hands fumbled with her purse. She pulled out her phone and with trembling fingers opened the digital copy of Emma's adoption file that she kept for emergencies. She scrolled to the police report and handed the phone to. He read it in silence, his face going pale. Then he showed his own phone screen to Sarah and Doctor. It was an intake photo of Max from the shelter, dated 4 years ago. The dog in the picture was painfully thin, with matted fur and sad eyes. But what made Sarah gasp was the location stamp on the photo. "Found. Alley behind Station 7, Colorado Springs Fire Department." The exact location, where Emma had been found 6 months earlier. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, her legs giving out. She sank to the ground beside Emma and Max, her mind reeling. "Oh my God, it's him, it's really him." Doctor's professional composure cracked, tears streaming down her face. "He's been looking for her," she whispered. "All this time he's been looking for her." His radio crackled again, but he pulled it off his belt and turned it off. His captain could wait. His shift could wait. The entire world could wait. because right now he was watching something that training, protocol, logic itself. He was watching a miracle. Emma leaned into Max, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I missed you," she whispered into his fur. "I didn't know where you went, but you came back. You found me." Max's entire body shook with emotion, and he let out a sound that was half whine, half sob. His large paw came up and gently, so gently, patted Emma's back in a gesture that looked heartbreakingly human. Around them, the crowd had dissolved into tears. Strangers hugged each other. Grown men wiped their eyes. The videos being recorded would eventually be viewed by hundreds of millions of people, but those present in that moment knew they were witnessing something that transcended the screen, something raw and real and absolutely impossible. Sarah pulled Emma and Max both into her arms, sobbing openly now. "I don't understand," she cried. "I don't understand how this is possible." Knelt beside them, placing one hand on Max's head and the other on Emma's shoulder. "Neither do I," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But I think we need to find out." Sarah Mitchell couldn't sleep. It was 2:47 a.m. and she'd been staring at her bedroom ceiling for hours, replaying the events of the day over and over in her mind. Down the hall, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in months. No nightmares, no crying out in the darkness. It was as if meeting Max had somehow healed something broken inside her daughter, that Sarah hadn't even known was damaged. After the scene at the fair, Officer had given Sarah his personal cell phone number and made her promise to call him the next day. They needed answers. They needed to understand what had happened. Doctor had offered to help with any veterinary or behavioral analysis. The crowd had eventually dispersed, but not before dozens of people had approached Sarah, sharing their own stories of inexplicable animal bonds, of connections that logic. But none of that helped Sarah now, alone in the darkness, her mind churning with questions that seemed to have no rational answers. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Sarah threw off her blankets and padded quietly down the hallway. She paused at Emma's door, peeking inside to see her daughter curled up peacefully, clutching the small stuffed dog they'd bought at the fair. Emma had insisted on it, saying it looked like Max. Sarah's heart ached with a love so fierce it almost hurt. She continued downstairs to the living room, turning on a single lamp that cast warm, golden light across the space. Her eyes landed on the closet in the corner, the one she avoided, the one that held all the memories of David, her late husband. But it also held something else, the sealed box of Emma's adoption records. Sarah and David had been so grateful to finally have a child after years of trying that they hadn't asked many questions. The private adoption agency had been vague about Emma's origins, and honestly, Sarah hadn't wanted to know. A baby needed parents. They could provide love and stability, and that was all that mattered. They'd taken the basic documents they needed and locked the rest away, deciding that if Emma ever wanted to know more about her birth circumstances, they'd explore it together when she was older. But older had always seemed so far away. And then David had died in a car accident when Emma was just 18 months old, and Sarah had been so consumed with grief and single parenthood that the adoption files had become just another box of painful memories she couldn't face. Until tonight. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the closet and pulled out the medium-sized cardboard box marked Emma, adoption records in David's handwriting. Just seeing his neat script made tears spring to her eyes. She carried the box to the couch and sat down, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Okay, David," she whispered to the empty room, "help me understand what's happening." She broke the tape seal and opened the box. Inside were folders, legal documents, medical records, and several sealed envelopes she'd never opened. Sarah started with the official adoption decree, reading through the legal language she'd scanned so quickly 3 years ago. Then she moved to the medical records. Emma had been healthy despite her circumstances, which had seemed like a miracle at the time. Finally, Sarah picked up a manila envelope labeled Police Report, Original Finding. Her hands shook so badly she almost couldn't open it. Inside were several pages of official police documentation, witness statements, and photographs that made her gasp. The first photo showed a bundled infant, Emma, lying in a cardboard box outside the Station 7 fire department in Colorado Springs. But it was the second photo that made Sarah's blood run cold. It showed the same scene from a different angle, and clearly visible in the frame were paw prints in the light snow around the box. Large canine paw prints that circled the area like someone had been packing, keeping watch. Sarah's vision blurred with tears as she began reading the police report. December 18, 2022, 6:47 a.m. Responded to call from Fire Station 7 regarding abandoned infant. Upon arrival, found female infant, approximately 2-3 weeks old, wrapped in blanket inside cardboard box. Infant was warm despite overnight temperatures dropping to 22 F. Initial assessment. Witnesses report seeing a large dog, possibly German Shepherd, lying beside the box throughout the night. Animal control was called but dog fled before arrival. Fire captain stated he observed the dog from the station window starting around 11 p.m. Dog appeared to be protecting the infant, lying beside and around the box. When captain approached at approximately 6:45 a.m., the dog retreated but did not leave the area entirely. Physical evidence. Canine fur recovered from blanket, see evidence bag 447. Paw prints circling the scene consistent with large breed dog. Depression in snow beside box suggests dog laid in position for extended period. Captain statement. That dog saved this baby's life. It was below freezing last night. Without the body heat from that animal, this infant wouldn't have survived. I've never seen anything like it. The dog didn't seem feral or aggressive. It seemed purposeful, like it was standing guard. Sarah's hands trembled so violently she almost dropped the papers. She read the words again and again, tears streaming down her face. There it was, in black and white, official police documentation of a dog protecting Emma on the coldest night of December, 3 years ago. But there was more. Clipped to the police report was a handwritten note from one of the responding officers. Follow-up. Attempted to locate the dog for 3 weeks following the incident. Multiple in the area around Station 7. Dog appeared to be returning to the location repeatedly, as if searching for something. Animal control unsuccessful in capture. Dog eventually disappeared from area entirely. Note. Found a piece of the infant's blanket approximately 100 yards from Station 7, suggesting the dog may have torn a piece to keep. This is highly unusual behavior. In my 15 years on the force, I've never seen a stray dog exhibit this level of attachment to a human, especially one it would have only encountered briefly. Personal observation. This wasn't random. That dog was protecting that baby specifically and deliberately. Someone needs to find that animal. It deserves recognition for saving a life. The officer's name was signed at the bottom. Officer Mark, badge 2847. Sarah's sobs came in great, heaving gasps now. She fumbled for her phone and pulled up the photos had shown her at the fair. The shelter intake pictures of Max from 4 years ago. She zoomed in on the image, looking at every detail. There, barely visible around Max's neck in the photo, was a piece of frayed fabric, tan and white stripes. Sarah scrambled back to the box and pulled out a sealed plastic bag she'd never opened before. Inside was the blanket Emma had been wrapped in, the one she'd been found with. With shaking hands, Sarah opened the bag for the first time in 3 years. The blanket was soft, worn with a pattern of tan and white stripes, and in one corner there was a jagged tear, as if something had been ripped away. Sarah held the blanket to her chest and wept. The pieces were all there. The timeline matched. The location matched. The behavior matched. Max hadn't just stumbled upon Emma that night. He'd chosen to stay with her to protect her, to keep her alive when she should have died from exposure. And then, after Emma was taken away, Max had searched. For 6 months, he'd searched until he was picked up by animal control, starved and desperate, still clutching a piece of her blanket. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. It was a text from officer sent 20 minutes ago. "Can't sleep. Need to talk. Are you awake?" Sarah's fingers flew across the screen. "Yes, I found the police report. It's him. It's really him. Max saved Emma's life." 3 dots appeared immediately then. "I found something too. Max's shelter records. You need to see this. Can I come over? I know it's late, but this can't wait." Sarah looked at the time. 3:15 a.m. Any rational person would say no, but nothing about this situation was rational. "Come now," she typed back. "Bring Max if you can." "Already in the car. Be there in 15. Sarah stood and walked back upstairs to check on Emma. Her daughter was still sleeping peacefully, that small stuffed dog clutched in her arms. Sarah knelt beside the bed and brushed Emma's hair back from her forehead. "Your angel found you, baby," she whispered. "After all this time he found you." Emma smiled in her sleep, and for just a moment Sarah could have sworn she heard her daughter whisper back, "I knew he would." Exactly 14 minutes later, Sarah heard the quiet rumble of an engine outside her house. She'd been packing the living room, the adoption papers spread across her coffee table like pieces of a puzzle she was desperately trying to solve. When she opened the front door, Officer stood on her porch with Max at his side, both of them looking as exhausted and emotionally drained as she felt. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said, stepping aside to let them in. "I know this is crazy." "Crazy doesn't even begin to cover it," interrupted, but his tone was gentle. He unclipped Max's leash, and the dog immediately began searching the house, his nose working overtime. Within seconds, Max was bounding up the stairs toward Emma's room. "Should we stop him?" Sarah asked, alarm creeping into her voice. Shook his head. "Let him go, he won't hurt her. I think we both know that now." They followed Max upstairs and found him sitting perfectly still outside Emma's closed bedroom door, his tail wagging softly. The dog looked back at them, then at the door, then back again, asking permission in the way only dogs can. Sarah's hand trembled as she turned the doorknob and eased the door open. Max slipped inside silently, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for an animal his size. They watched from the doorway as he approached Emma's bed, sniffed her gently, then carefully, so carefully, laid down on the floor beside her bed, his body forming a protective barrier between Emma and the door. Emma stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw Max, a sleepy smile spread across her face. "You came back," she murmured, reaching down to touch his head. Within seconds she was asleep again, her small hand resting on Max's fur. Sarah had to lean against the doorframe to keep from collapsing, placed a steadying hand on her shoulder, and together they retreated downstairs, leaving the bedroom door cracked open. Back in the living room sat a thick folder on the coffee table next to Sarah's adoption papers. His face was grave, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "After I texted you, I couldn't wait. I drove to the station and pulled everything we have on Max. His complete history from the shelter, his training records, behavioral assessments, everything." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "Sarah, I've been working with this dog for 5 years and I thought I knew everything about him. I was wrong." He opened the folder and pulled out a document with the Denver Animal Shelter logo at the top. "This is Max's intake report from June 2023. He was found as a stray in an alley behind Station 7 in Colorado Springs, the exact same location where Emma was found 6 months earlier." Sarah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She'd already made that connection from her own documents. "But here's what I didn't know," continued, pulling out another paper. "The shelter workers noted that Max was severely malnourished when they found him. He weighed only 48 pounds. A dog his size should weigh at least 75. They estimated he'd been living on the streets for months, barely surviving." He looked up at Sarah, his eyes glistening. "The intake notes say he was found lying in a specific spot in that alley, and he fought viciously, sent 2 animal control officers to the hospital when they tried to remove him from that location. Pulled out a photograph, his hands shaking. They took this photo to document his condition. The image showed a skeletal Max, ribs visible through matted fur, his eyes hollow and desperate. But what made Sarah gasp was what was visible around his neck, a piece of fabric, tan and white striped, tied like a makeshift collar. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. She grabbed Emma's blanket from where she'd left it on the couch and held it up to the photograph. The pattern was identical. "There's more," said, his voice breaking. The shelter director at the time wrote a personal note in the file. He pulled out a handwritten letter on official letterhead. "My 30 years running this shelter, I have never encountered a dog like this one. Despite his aggression during capture once contained, he showed no food aggression, no territorial behavior, no signs of typical stray dog psychology. Instead, he exhibited what I can only describe as grief. For the first 2 weeks in our facility, he refused to eat. He would sit facing the door of his kennel, waiting, not with the anxiety of an abandoned pet, but with the purposefulness of someone on a mission. He had clearly been caring for himself on the streets for an extended period, yet he showed no signs of having been astray his entire life. This was a dog who'd had human contact, who understood commands, who'd been socialized, and then lost something, or someone. The piece of fabric he wore around his neck appeared to be from a baby blanket. He became violent when we attempted to remove it. We ultimately had to sedate him for medical treatment, and even then, once he woke, he searched his kennel desperately until we returned it to him. My professional opinion, this dog was bonded to an infant and became separated. He was searching. Everything about his behavior suggests he was protecting something, lost that something, and spent months trying to find it again. I am recommending this dog for police or military service training. Despite his trauma, he shows remarkable intelligence, loyalty, and protective instincts. With proper rehabilitation and training, he could be exceptional. But whoever adopts or trains this dog needs to understand, he's been through something profound. He's still searching for what he lost. The letter was signed by Director, dated June 15, 2023. Sarah couldn't stop the tears now. They flowed freely as she held the blanket, looking at the photograph of Max in his darkest moment, still clinging to the only piece of Emma he had left. "He never forgot her," said, his own voice thick with emotion. "For 6 months he survived on the streets, starving, fighting, searching. And even after the shelter took him in, even after I adopted him and trained him, some part of him was always looking. I just didn't know what for." Sarah looked up at, "How is this possible? How could he have known to protect her in the first place? How could he have remembered her all this time?" Pulled out one more document, a printout of an email. "I contacted Doctor, the vet from the fair, and she put me in touch with a colleague who specializes in canine cognition and memory at Colorado State University. I sent her everything we have. She responded an hour ago." He handed Sarah the printout. She read through tears. "Officer, what you've described is extraordinary but not scientifically impossible. Dogs have been documented recognizing individuals after years of separation through scent memory. An infant's scent is particularly distinct and would have been deeply imprinted during the hours Max spent protecting Emma. However, the initial protection behavior is what fascinates me most. Dogs can detect vulnerability and distress in humans. If Max encountered Emma shortly after she was abandoned, while she was crying, cold, and producing stress hormones, his natural protective instincts would have been triggered. Some dogs, particularly those with strong guardian breeds in their lineage, will spontaneously protect vulnerable humans, especially infants. What makes this case unique is the duration and intensity of Max's attachment. The fact that he continued searching for months, kept a piece of her blanket, and remained bonded enough to recognize her 3 years later suggests an imprinting that occurred during a critical window, both for the puppy Max would have been approximately 1.52 years old at the time, and for Emma's development. This isn't just memory. This is a bond formed during a life-or-death situation that essentially rewired both of their neurological systems. Emma's brain would have registered Max as her protector during a critical early development period. Max's brain would have registered Emma as something to be protected at all costs. In essence, they became family in the truest biological sense. Separation was traumatic for both. Reunion is allowing both to heal from that trauma. I would very much like to study this case further, with your permission. Dr. Jennifer Wu, Ph.D. Colorado State University. Sarah set down the email and looked toward the stairs, where Max now lay protecting Emma just as he had 3 years ago on that freezing December night. "So it's real," she whispered. "This bond, this connection, it's real." "It's real," confirmed. He pulled out one final item from his folder, a USB drive. "And I have proof. The fire station where Emma was found has security cameras. They keep archived footage for 7 years for insurance purposes. I called in every favor I had to get this." Sarah's heart hammered as pulled out his laptop and inserted the drive. The grainy black and white footage showed the front entrance of Station 7, timestamp reading December 17, 2022, 10:47 p.m. They watched in silence as a figure approached, a young woman, barely visible, carrying a bundle. She placed it carefully near the door, looked around frantically, and disappeared into the darkness. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, at 11:03 p.m., a shape emerged from the shadows. A dog, a German Shepherd, moving cautiously toward the box. He sniffed it, circled it, and then, heartbreakingly, lay down beside it, his body curling protectively around the cardboard that held a crying infant. For the next 7 hours, the footage showed Max's vigil. He never left. When the temperature dropped and his breath became visible in the cold air, he pressed closer. When Emma's cries intensified, he adjusted his position to provide more warmth. Twice, he looked directly at the camera, his eyes reflecting the light, eyes filled with purpose and determination. At 6:43 a.m., the station door opened. Max immediately stood, positioning himself between the approaching firefighter and Emma. Only when the firefighter called out gently did Max slowly back away, never taking his eyes off the baby. The last shot showed him disappearing into the alley, looking back one final time before vanishing. "He saved her life," Sarah sobbed. "If he hadn't been there, she wouldn't have survived," finished quietly. The medical examiner's report estimated she would have had less than an hour in those temperatures without external heat. They sat in silence, the weight of what they'd discovered settling over them like snow. Upstairs, they could hear Max's gentle snoring, finally at peace after years of searching. Sarah looked at, her face streaked with tears but her voice steady. "What do we do now?" Closed his laptop and met her eyes. Now we make sure they're never separated again." Posted the story on the Denver Police Department's official Facebook page at 6:30 a.m., just as the sun was rising over the city. He'd spent an hour carefully crafting the post, wanting to honor the magnitude of what they'd discovered while respecting Sarah and Emma's privacy. The post included 3 photos: Emma and Max at the fair, the security footage screenshot of Max protecting baby Emma, and a side-by-side comparison of the blanket piece Max had worn and Emma's original blanket. The caption was simple: "Sometimes miracles have 4 legs." 3 years ago, K-9 officer Max was found starving in an alley, clutching a piece of fabric from a baby blanket. Yesterday, he found the child he'd been searching for. This is their story. Never give up, K-9 hero. Set down his phone and went to make coffee, expecting maybe a few hundred likes from the usual community supporters. He had no idea he just lit a match to kindling that would ignite the entire world. By 7:00 a.m., the post had 5,000 shares. By 8:00 a.m., It had gone viral 5,000,000 shares and climbing exponentially. By 9:00 a.m., every major news outlet in the country was calling the police department's public information office, which was completely overwhelmed. The phone lines crashed. The department's website went down from traffic overload. Sarah's phone began ringing at 8:47 a.m. Still exhausted from the emotional night, she'd finally fallen asleep on the couch around 5:00 a.m. The insistent buzzing jolted her awake. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Immediately, another call came in. Then another. Then her phone started dinging with text messages, Facebook notifications, Instagram mentions, and Twitter alerts. Confused and still groggy, Sarah opened her Facebook app. Her breath caught in her throat. This post had been shared to her timeline by at least 30 people she knew. Her notifications showed hundreds of friend requests, thousands of messages, and her own profile was being tagged in posts across multiple platforms. She called out, her voice panicked. The officer appeared from the kitchen, Emma perched on his shoulders with Max trotting alongside them. They'd been making breakfast together, Emma giggling as Max performed tricks for pieces of bacon. "What's wrong?" asked, immediately alert. "Your post." Sarah held up her phone, her hands shaking. "How many people follow the police department page?" His face went pale. He pulled out his own phone and opened Facebook. His eyes widened in disbelief. The post had 287,000 shares and was still climbing. The comments section had over 50,000 responses. "Oh my God," he whispered. "I thought maybe it would get some local attention, but this." His phone rang. The caller ID showed Captain Miller, his direct supervisor, answered with a grimace. "Sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you just gave the department the most positive press coverage we've had in a decade." Captain Miller's voice was excited, not angry. "Do you have any idea what's happening? Good Morning America just called. So did CNN, NBC, the BBC from England. They want to interview you, the dog, and the family. The mayor is thrilled. The chief wants to give Max a commendation. What you've shared is extraordinary." Glanced at Sarah, who looked terrified. "Sir, with respect, this is a private family matter. Sarah and Emma didn't ask for this attention." "I understand that and will respect their privacy completely. But people need this story. Have you read the comments? Have you seen what people are saying?" Put the phone on speaker and began scrolling through the comments with Sarah looking over his shoulder. What they saw made both of them tear up. "I'm a veteran with PTSD, and this story just reminded me why I fight every day. If Max could search for 3 years, I can keep going too. My daughter is adopted, and this shows me that the bonds we form are stronger than biology. Love is love, no matter how it begins. I lost my service dog 6 months ago and haven't been able to move forward. This story reminded me that the love never dies. Thank you for sharing this. I work at an animal shelter and we're overwhelmed and underfunded. I just donated $500 in Max's name. Who's with me? My son is autistic and has been begging for a dog. I've been hesitant, but seeing this bond has changed my mind. Animals save lives." The comments went on and on, thousands of them, each one sharing how Max and Emma's story had touched them, inspired them, given them hope. Sarah scrolled with tears streaming down her face, reading message after message from people around the world who were connecting with this story on such a deep, personal level. By noon, the hashtags MaxandEmma, K9Hero, and Never Stop Searching were trending worldwide. The video of their reunion at the fair, recorded by bystanders, had been viewed 15 million times. News helicopters were circling Sarah's neighborhood. Had to call in additional officers just to manage the crowds of people leaving flowers, dog toys, and letters on Sarah's front lawn. Dr. Jennifer Wu from Colorado State University appeared on CNN explaining the science behind Max and Emma's bond. Animal behaviorists were weighing in across every news platform. Celebrities were sharing the story. Ellen tweeted, "This is the content we all need. Max is a hero and this little girl is so lucky. I'm not crying, you're crying. Max Sandema." By 2:00 p.m., a GoFundMe page that someone had started to support Max and Emma's future had raised $47,000. Sarah hadn't asked for it, didn't even know who'd started it, but the donations kept pouring in with messages like, "For Emma's college fund, to help with Max's care, because love like this deserves support." The adoption agency that had handled Emma's case released a carefully worded statement praising the extraordinary circumstances and the resilience of both child and animal. They announced they were establishing the Max Fund to support other children who'd experienced trauma, with a starting donation of $10,000. The former shelter director who'd written about Max years ago was tracked down by reporters. Her interview aired on the evening news. "I knew that dog was searching for something. I knew he'd experienced a profound loss. But I never imagined," her voice broke, "I never imagined we'd see this ending. This is why we do what we do. This is why every animal matters." By evening, the story had reached 195 countries. It was translated into 47 languages. People in Tokyo, London, Sydney, and Mumbai were crying over the same images, the same footage, the same impossible reunion. But perhaps the most touching response came from an unexpected source. At 7:30 p.m., Sarah received a message on Facebook from someone named Jennifer. "My name is Jenny. 3 years ago, I was homeless and pregnant. I made the hardest decision of my life when I left my baby at that fire station. I had a dog, my only companion, named Sergeant. When I left Emma that night, Sergeant followed me. I tried to bring him back, but he wouldn't leave her. I didn't know what happened to either of them after that. I've spent 3 years hoping my baby found a good home and wondering about my dog. Thank you for loving them both. Thank you for sharing this. I'm in recovery now, working 2 jobs, and seeing them happy has given me the closure I desperately needed. Emma's real mother sends her love." Sarah read the message 3 times, tears blurring her vision. She showed it to, who immediately contacted the police department to verify the woman's identity. Within hours, they confirmed. Jennifer had been reported in the area that night, and her description matched the figure in the security footage. Sarah replied simply, "Your daughter is loved beyond measure. Your dog never gave up on her. You gave her life twice, once when you bore her and once when you made sure she'd be found safely. Thank you for that courage." As night fell over Denver, Sarah sat in Emma's room watching her daughter sleep with Max curled protectively on the floor beside her bed. Her phone continued buzzing with notifications, interview requests, messages of support, news alerts, but she silenced it all. In one day, their private miracle had become a global phenomenon. Millions of people had been touched by a story of loyalty, love, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us, human and animal alike. But for Sarah, watching Emma's small hand rest on Max's head even in sleep, none of the outside noise mattered. What mattered was that a promise made on a freezing December night had finally been kept. Max had found his girl, and this time he was never letting go. 3 weeks after the story broke, Sarah found herself sitting in a sterile laboratory at the University of Colorado's Veterinary Teaching Hospital, watching as Dr. Jennifer Wu carefully collected samples from Max's fur. Emma sat on the floor beside the examination table, holding Max's paw and singing softly to keep him calm. The dog's eyes never left the little girl, even as the scientist worked around him. "We're almost done, big guy," Dr. Wu said gently, placing the samples into carefully labeled containers. She looked at Sarah with compassionate eyes. "I know this has been overwhelming. The media attention, the scrutiny, people questioning whether this is real. They think I'm making it up for attention," Sarah said quietly, her exhaustion evident. "I've gotten death threats from people saying I'm exploiting a coincidence. Others claim I trained Max to react to Emma, that this is all staged for money." She laughed bitterly. As if I'd put my daughter through this circus for a GoFundMe page I didn't even start. The viral story had brought not just support, but skeptics. Online forums dissected every detail. Conspiracy theorists claimed the police department staged the whole thing for positive PR. Animal behaviorists debated whether Max's reaction could be explained by simple scent attraction rather than true recognition. The pressure for definitive proof had become suffocating. Dr. Wu placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. That's why we're doing this. Not for the skeptics. They'll always find something to doubt. But for you, for Emma, and for history. What we're documenting here is extraordinary, and it deserves rigorous scientific validation. Over the past weeks, Sarah had agreed to let Dr. Wu and her team conduct comprehensive testing. They'd collected samples from Emma's original blanket, which still contained biological material from both the infant Emma and the dog who'd protected her. They'd taken DNA samples from Max. They'd conducted behavioral assessments, scent recognition tests, and neurological scans. Every test was documented, peer-reviewed, and conducted with the kind of scientific rigor that would satisfy even the harshest critics. Doctor, the veterinarian from the fair who'd first suggested this might be real, entered the lab with a tablet in hand. Her face was lit with barely contained excitement. The preliminary results just came back from the genetics lab. Sarah, you need to see this. Sarah stood, her heart hammering. Emma looked up from where she sat with Max, sensing her mother's tension. Is Max okay, Mommy? Max is perfect, sweetheart, Doctor assured her. She pulled up images on her tablet, complex DNA sequences that meant nothing to Sarah but everything to the scientists. We analyzed the saliva markers that were preserved on Emma's original blanket. Despite 3 years of storage and degradation, we were able to extract viable samples. Sarah, her voice cracked with emotion, the DNA profile matches Max with 99.7% certainty. The lab fell silent. Even the other researchers stopped their work, understanding the magnitude of what had just been confirmed. It's really him, Sarah whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. It's scientifically proven. Max is the dog who saved Emma. Dr. Wu pulled up additional data on her computer screen. But there's more. We've been conducting behavioral assessments that measure attachment responses. Emma, can you come here for a moment, sweetheart? Emma skipped over, Max immediately following and positioning himself protectively at her side. Dr. Wu showed Sarah a series of brain scan images. These are fMRI results showing Max's neurological responses to different stimuli. This first image shows his brain activity when a stranger approaches. See this region here. Normal alertness, slight elevation in stress hormones, but controlled. She pulled up another image. This is his response when I approached. Similar pattern, professional, controlled, typical for a trained police dog. Another image appeared. This is when officer approached. Notice the activity in the bonding and attachment centers. That's what we'd expect from a primary handler relationship. Then she pulled up a final scan, and Sarah gasped. The image showed Max's brain completely lit up, multiple regions firing simultaneously in patterns that looked almost human in their complexity. This is his response when Emma enters the room. Sarah, I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of studying canine cognition. The activation patterns here involve the same neural pathways that parents show when seeing their children. Max's brain literally processes Emma the way a parent processes their offspring. Doctor pulled up her own data. We conducted separation anxiety tests, completely ethical and brief, I promise. When we separated Max from Emma for just 5 minutes with a closed door between them, his cortisol levels, stress hormones, spiked by 340%. His heart rate increased to dangerous levels. He showed all the physiological signs of acute trauma. She looked at Emma, who was now hugging Max's neck. But here's what's remarkable. Emma showed the same response. Her cortisol levels increased by 280%. Her heart rate elevated. She began displaying signs of panic. They're biologically bonded, Dr. Wu explained. During that critical night when Max protected Emma, both of their brains were flooded with oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Emma's developing infant brain imprinted on Max as a primary caregiver. Max's brain registered Emma as family, as someone to protect at all costs. The trauma of separation essentially left both of them with a psychological wound. Their reunion isn't just emotionally satisfying, it's healing. Sarah sank into a chair, overwhelmed by the scientific confirmation of what her heart had known all along. So when people say it's just a dog recognizing a familiar scent, they're wrong, Dr. Wu said firmly. This goes far beyond scent memory. Max and Emma formed what we call a critical period bond, a connection established during a developmental window when the brain is maximally plastic and receptive. It's the same mechanism that causes baby ducks to imprint on their mother, or human infants to bond with parents. Once formed, these bonds are essentially permanent. She pulled up a final document on her screen, a comprehensive report with multiple signatures from experts across various fields. We've had this reviewed by colleagues in veterinary medicine, human psychology, neuroscience, and animal behavior. The consensus is unanimous. What you've witnessed is real, it's measurable, and it's one of the most remarkable cases of human-animal bonding ever documented. Doctor added, "We're publishing our findings in the Journal of Veterinary Behavior and the Journal of Human-Animal Interaction Studies. This isn't just a heartwarming story anymore, Sarah. It's science. It's proof that the bonds we form, human or animal, are more powerful and more lasting than we ever imagined." Officer, who'd been standing quietly in the corner observing, finally spoke up. "I brought something too." He pulled out a thick folder. The Colorado Springs Police Department completed their investigation. They tracked down 3 witnesses who saw Max with a pregnant homeless woman in the weeks before Emma was found. One witness, a convenience store owner, said the woman called the dog Sergeant and that he never left her side. He opened the folder to reveal a statement from Jennifer, Emma's birth mother, now sober and in recovery. Sarah had been in contact with her through carefully monitored channels, and Jenny had provided a formal statement. "Sergeant was a stray who adopted me when I was at my lowest. He protected me through my pregnancy. The night I left Emma at the fire station, I tried to bring Sergeant with me, but he refused to leave her. I thought I'd lost them both forever. Knowing he kept his promise to protect her and that they found each other again has given me the strength to continue my recovery. Max, Sergeant, is a hero. He did what I couldn't, he stayed." Sarah read the statement through tears. Every piece was falling into place. The DNA evidence, the neurological proof, the witness statements, the behavioral science. It was all there, documented and by experts who had no stake in the story except the truth. Dr. Wu handed Sarah a leather-bound copy of their complete findings, hundreds of pages of research, data, and analysis. "This is for Emma," she said, "for when she's older and wants to understand just how extraordinary her bond with Max truly is. This isn't folklore or coincidence. This is documented proof that love, real, measurable, biological love, transcends circumstances, defies odds, and endures against all obstacles." Emma, oblivious to the scientific significance of the moment, was lying on the floor with Max, both of them dozing peacefully in the afternoon sun streaming through the lab windows. Sarah looked at them and felt something shift inside her, the last traces of doubt, the lingering questions, the fear that maybe this was all too good to be true, all of it dissolved. "Thank you," Sarah said to the assembled scientists. "Thank you for proving that miracles can be real." Dr. Wu smiled. "We didn't prove a miracle, Sarah. We proved something even better. We proved that love is the most powerful force in nature, and when it forms, nothing, not time, not distance, not even years of separation, can break it." As they prepared to leave, Doctor pulled Sarah aside one last time. "The media is going to want to cover this. The scientific confirmation will reignite everything. Are you ready for that?" Sarah looked at Emma and Max, watching her daughter whisper secrets into the dog's ear while his tail wagged contentedly. "Yes," she said with certainty, "because now we have something more important than a viral story. We have truth, we have proof, and we have closure." And for the first time in 3 weeks, Sarah felt the weight of doubt lift from her shoulders completely. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, Sarah stood in the crowd gathered at Denver Police Department headquarters, watching as her daughter, now 4 years old, stood on a specially built platform beside the dog who never stopped protecting her. The ceremony to honor Max's retirement had drawn thousands of people, filling the streets surrounding the building. News crews from around the world were broadcasting live. But for Sarah, the only thing that mattered was the joy radiating from Emma's face as she wore her matching police hat, standing proudly beside her best friend. Police Chief Robert approached the podium, his voice booming through the speakers. "Today we honor a hero who exemplifies the very best of what it means to serve and protect. K-9 Officer Max has served this department with distinction for 5 years, with an exemplary record that includes 47 successful searches, 23 criminal apprehensions, and countless community service hours." He paused, his voice growing thick with emotion. But his most important mission began 3 years ago, on the coldest night of December, when he chose to protect an abandoned infant he'd never met. Today, we recognize that choice, and we celebrate the miracle that brought them back together. The crowd erupted in applause. Max, standing at perfect attention despite his retirement, seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. Chief placed a specially designed medal around Max's neck, the department's highest honor, normally reserved for officers who saved lives in the line of duty. "This medal has only been awarded 12 times in our department's history," the chief continued. "Max is the first K-9 to receive it, but more importantly," he looked directly at Emma, "Max is being granted early retirement with full honors so that he can fulfill his most critical assignment, protecting Emma Mitchell for the rest of his days." Emma threw her arms around Max's neck, and the crowd's applause transformed into a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes as Officer, standing beside her, squeezed her shoulder supportively. He'd been instrumental in making this day possible, navigating the bureaucracy and paperwork required for Max's early retirement. "He's home now," whispered to Sarah. "After all those years of searching, he's finally home." The formal adoption papers had been signed 3 weeks earlier. Max was officially Sarah's dog now, but everyone knew the truth. Max belonged to Emma, just as Emma belonged to Max. Their bond transcended ownership, paperwork, or human definitions of family. The ceremony concluded with Emma presenting Max with a custom-made vest that read, "Guardian Angel, on duty since 2022. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. This wasn't just a retirement party. It was a celebration of loyalty, perseverance, and the unbreakable bonds that connect souls across impossible circumstances. That evening, back at their home, which had been renovated using funds from the overwhelming GoFundMe donations, Sarah sat in Emma's room watching her daughter read a picture book to Max. The room had been transformed into a perfect space for both child and dog. Emma's bed, Max's orthopedic dog bed positioned directly beside it, photos of their journey together covering the walls, and a special shelf holding Max's medal alongside Emma's baby blanket, the one that had connected them across 3 years of separation. Sarah had created an Instagram account 3 months ago, initially just to share updates with the thousands of people who'd messaged asking about Emma and Max. She'd named it Emma's Guardian Angel and expected maybe a few hundred followers. Instead, the account had exploded to 3.2 million followers, with each post receiving hundreds of thousands of likes and thousands of heartfelt comments. The photos told their story better than words ever could. Emma and Max playing in the snow, both wearing matching scarves. Max waiting patiently outside Emma's preschool, becoming a beloved fixture that other children looked forward to seeing. Emma dressing Max in costumes for imaginary tea parties, the dignified police dog wearing tutus and tiaras with surprising grace. Max sleeping beside Emma's bed every night, his paw stretched out to touch her hand. The two of them sharing ice cream on the porch, Max's tongue catching drips that Emma missed. But Sarah's favorite photo, the one that had been shared over 1,000,000 times, showed Emma and Max sleeping in identical positions, both on their sides, both with one hand paw stretched out, both with peaceful expressions that spoke of complete contentment and security. The caption read simply, "Home is wherever you are." The impact of their story had rippled far beyond viral fame. In the 6 months since their reunion, remarkable things had happened. The Colorado State Legislature passed Max's Law, requiring animal shelters to keep detailed records of animals found near sites where children were abandoned, and establishing a database to help facilitate future reunions. The law also increased funding for animal shelters statewide. Adoption agencies across the country implemented new protocols for documenting any animals present when children were found, recognizing that these animals might represent important connections worth preserving. The original GoFundMe, which Sarah had eventually taken control of, had raised $847,000. Sarah kept what she needed for Emma's education and Max's lifetime care, then donated the rest $600,000 to establish the Max Foundation, which provided service dogs to children who'd experienced trauma and funded animal rescue operations nationwide. Dr. Jennifer Wu's research paper, Critical Period Bonding in Human-Canine Relationships, a case study, had become one of the most cited papers in animal behavior science, fundamentally changing how experts understood cross-species bonding. Max's story inspired a children's book, The Dog Who Never Forgot, which became a New York Times bestseller. All proceeds went to animal welfare organizations. Most significantly, animal shelter adoptions increased by 34% nationwide in the months following Max and Emma's reunion. Thousands of animals found forever homes because people had been reminded of the incredible capacity for loyalty and love that animals possess. Emma's birth mother, Jennifer, had completed her recovery program and was now working as a counselor helping other women facing similar struggles. She'd met Sarah and Emma twice, emotional encounters where she'd thanked Max personally for doing what she couldn't, staying with her daughter. Jenny had no desire to disrupt Emma's life, but knowing her daughter was safe, loved, and protected had given her the strength to rebuild her own life. As Sarah watched Emma drift off to sleep, the little girl's hand resting on Max's head, she reflected on how drastically their lives had changed in just 6 months. They'd gone from quiet obscurity to global recognition. They'd gone from a small family of 2 to a family of 3. They'd gone from wondering about Emma's origins to having closure, understanding, and even a relationship with her birth mother. Max lifted his head, looking at Sarah with those intelligent, knowing eyes. She reached down and scratched behind his ears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for never giving up on her. Thank you for finding her. Thank you for being exactly who she needed when she needed you most." Max's tail wagged softly, and he placed his head back down beside Emma, resuming his eternal vigil, the one he'd started on a freezing December night 3 years ago and would continue until his last breath. Sarah's phone buzzed with a notification. Another message on Instagram, one of thousands she received daily, but this one made her smile through tears. "My son has autism and has been terrified of dogs his entire life. Today, after months of following Emma and Max's story, he asked if we could adopt a dog. We visited a shelter this afternoon, and he connected with a senior German Shepherd no one else wanted. We're bringing her home tomorrow. Thank you for showing us that the most unlikely friendships can become the most important ones. You've changed our lives." Sarah screenshot the message and added it to a folder she kept on her phone, Hundreds of similar stories from people whose lives had been touched by Max and Emma's journey. Children who'd found courage, families who'd adopted rescue animals, people who'd been reminded that love, loyalty, and hope still existed in the world. As Sarah turned off the light and headed to her own room, she paused in the doorway, looking back at Emma and Max, the little girl and her guardian angel, finally together, finally at peace, finally home. Their story had started with abandonment and loss, with cold darkness and desperate survival. But it had transformed into something beautiful, a testament to the power of loyalty, the strength of love, and the truth that some bonds once formed can never truly be broken. Max had made a promise on that frozen night 3 years ago, to protect this child, to keep her safe, to never let her face the darkness alone. And even when the world separated them, even when logic said reunion was impossible, even when years passed and hope seemed foolish, Max had kept searching. Because that's what love does. Real love doesn't quit. Real love doesn't forget. Real love never ever gives up. And in the end, against all odds and despite every obstacle, love had won. Max had found his girl. And this time, forever wasn't just a promise, it was a guarantee.